Hey everyone. So, to preface this video, I just want to emphasize that we are going to see Anakin in Vader's body. This is not something, again, like I said last video, this is not a thing where Vader was dreaming the whole time. No, they really did switch bodies. What we're going to see is Anakin inside of the body of Darth Vader during the events of A New Hope, or the events right before A New Hope. And then we're going to switch back and forth between that perspective and the perspective of Darth Vader in the body of young Anakin during the events of Attack of the Clones. So just keep that in mind so you don't freak out as we move forward here. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. Anakin felt a wave of terror and panic wash over him as he realized that his arms and legs were missing and his body looked to have been severely burnt. What happened to him? This had to be a nightmare. He looked around, trying to see what was outside the Bacta tank and to get an understanding of his surroundings. But not recognizing where he was at made him panic even more. Thankfully, no amount of his heavy breathing and flailing would cause the Bacta tank any damage due to the very secure breathing tubes and Bacta tank, but as his emotions ran rampant, he inadvertently started to lash out in the Force, and when he saw a crack form in the Bacta tank, that gave him a bit of pause. He realized that he needed to calm down. It seemed this Bacta tank was the only thing keeping him alive. If this broke, what would he do? Even if he was being held captive by some sort of enemy to the Jedi, he would have no power to protect himself without the ability to walk or even wield a lightsaber. A state of shock started to replace the panic as he calmed down. Anakin decided to analyze the situation he was in. The room he was in did not at all look familiar. Perhaps this was an advanced medical facility on Coruscant, or perhaps some other planet. He realized what was left of his body looked burnt, and it did not at all look fresh. It seemed that whatever happened to him had happened several months ago at least, and now his body had began to scar over. The shock Anakin was experiencing was giving him a temporary feeling of calm and stillness. He thought to himself about what the most likely scenario could be. Perhaps he had been in some sort of freak accident, or perhaps he was in a battle that not only was the cause of his injuries, but also left him with memory loss about the battle itself. The last thing he could remember was getting back from the border dispute mission with Obi-Wan and Ancion, and laying down to rest in his quarters at the Jedi Temple. Whatever had happened, he was most likely being tended to by the Jedi and Republic, being kept alive for months, and he was just now waking from a coma. Or perhaps this was just a very strange nightmare after all. Whatever the case, all he needed to do now was wait. At any moment he was sure Obi-Wan would walk in and explain everything to him. He needed only to wait. Patience, Obi-Wan always told him. Patience. Switching back to the perspective of Darth Vader inside the body of the Padawan Anakin in the past, upon arriving at Coruscant, Vader was able to arrange a safe place under the protection of the Republic for his mother, Shmi, along with the Lars family to stay. Shortly after, the Jedi Council explained to Anakin and Obi-Wan that in the middle of the night, they'd been notified by Padme Amidala that she had received an anonymous tip that her life is in danger, and not to land on Coruscant this morning. She would be staying on Naboo for the time being under protection, and the Jedi Council assigned Anakin to be sent to be her personal bodyguard to ensure her safety, while the Jedi Council had assigned Obi-Wan to investigate who could be behind the supposed threat on Padme's life, as when Vader had given the anonymous tip, he also gave the detail that a bounty hunter was the one behind the threat. This was exactly what Vader had planned for. It would be a recreation of the same circumstances that he and Padme had originally been in, which led to her falling in love with him. This would be the perfect time to have a second start with Padme, as well as to have some time to flesh out his longer-term plans to ensure the safety of Padme and his mother. After bidding farewell to his mother and to Obi-Wan, Vader would make his way to Naboo for his assignment to protect Padme. His time with her was such a shocking contrast with what Vader was used to. Although for him it was not technically the first time he had kindled a relationship with her, it had been well over 20 years since he had, and he quite literally felt like an entirely different person back then. In Vader's mind, he killed the persona of Anakin Skywalker when he transformed into Darth Vader. Now, adopting the persona of Anakin was much more akin to how Darth Sidious adopted the moniker of Senator Palpatine, it merely being a mask to hide the Sith Lord beneath. But even if Vader did not feel like the same Anakin that Padme fell in love with, that did not change the fact that Vader never really stopped loving Padme. And although he was putting on a facade pretending to be the same Anakin she knew, showing her the romantic and loving emotions he had for her was as genuine as could be. If anything, now that Vader was more experienced and had learned to control his emotions better, he would have a greater ability to maintain control over his temporary outbursts of darkness that had caused Padme to fear him in the past, and may even have an easier time of advancing their relationship. Meanwhile, switching back to the perspective of Anakin in Vader's body, hours had passed. No one had come into the room to check on Anakin. This caused him great confusion as he was certain that Obi-Wan or someone would come in to check in on him and his recovery from whatever accident he assumed he had been in. As the time passed, and as the shock began to wear off, and as he did not awake from what he hoped was a nightmare, Anakin began to feel an intense sense of dread and despair as the full weight of the realization that he no longer had his arms and legs pressed down on him, and what remained of his body was horribly scarred from burn damage. Feeling drained of hope and waking up to this reality, and having been waiting for hours for someone to show up, Anakin also felt drained of his energy and fell into a sleep. Eventually, Anakin awoke as he heard a voice echoing through the room. "Lord Vader, there is an urgent transmission for you from Grand Moff Tarkin. He requests to speak with you immediately." Anakin assumed this came from some sort of intercom. Several droids then emerged from the shadows, and immediately Anakin started to be ejected from the bacta tank as the droids automatically began to connect robotic limbs to his arms and legs, and then place a black suit on him. His mind swirled with questions and confusion. That man called him Lord Vader? What is going on? His train of thought was interrupted by a sharp pain as a helmet was placed on his head, as what he felt to be needles pierced the top of his skull and spine. He audibly expressed this pain and backhanded the droid that placed the helmet on him, who fell to the floor. It was then Anakin realized that he now had the ability to move his cybernetic limbs, when before the helmet was placed, he was not able to. He realized, being the mechanic he was, that they must be some sort of neural needles that enabled him to make use of these limbs. The breathing tube that was attached to his mouth in the bacta tank was disconnected from his mouth and replaced with a breathing apparatus part of the mask. The droid he had backhanded spoke up. "Lord Vader, forgive me, as you know the needles are essential although painful. Forgive me, Lord Vader." Anakin looked back at the droid, again with being called Lord Vader. What could this possibly mean? "It's all right." Anakin was shocked at the sound of his voice, coming out sounding very deep and robotic. Also, with each breath he took, he heard a loud, mechanical sounding inhale and exhale. It seemed that his lungs had been damaged in whatever accident happened to him as well. Anakin stood there, fully enveloped in this black armor, and noticed he was much taller than he was used to. The pain from the neural needles penetrating his skull and his mask was intense. Anakin felt woozy and swayed slightly from the pain and from how overwhelmed he felt at his terrifying and confusing circumstances, still sinking into a feeling of despair from the loss of limbs, and bewildered at why he was being called Darth Vader and why he was put inside of this massive black armor. He stumbled to a nearby wall and leaned his hand against it, breathing heavily, the sound of the loud mechanical breath becoming faster. We switch back to the perspective of Vader, recreating and reliving the events that led to he and Padme falling in love was having a powerful effect upon Vader. He had started to notice this effect upon him when he saved his mother and was feeling it even stronger now. For the first time in decades, he was feeling happiness. He was smiling true and genuine smiles. Actual laughter was leaving his lips. He felt in his heart the warmth and resplendence of love, comfort, and peace. These feelings felt strange and alien to him, for hatred, anger, regret, these were the only emotions he felt within him for so long. These emotions made him feel uncomfortable. He was so accustomed to being devoid of anything resembling joy. That aforementioned fear he felt within him only grew the more he felt this joy and love. He must become more powerful as he could be, to make sure he does not lose his mother and Padme this time. But at the same time, he also must make sure he does not let his emotions run wild and out of his control like last time, lest he risk destroying the ones he loves and his connection with them. In light of this, he became more and more sure of his plans for the future. The end goal would be what his original goal had been when he had first embraced the dark side. He would create his empire and enforce peace and justice through the galaxy in the way he envisioned it, in order to protect those he loved, and to end corruption in the galaxy and bring reason, even if he needed to enforce it with an iron fist, and would destroy the obstacles that stood in the way of this goal. Not just the Jedi, but Darth Sidious as well. But this time, his plan to achieve that goal would be different and more calculated. He would allow for Sidious to enact Order 66 so the clones could take care of the Jedi, but then he would expose Sidious to the entire galaxy, that he was the one behind everything, the Clone Wars, the Separatists, and he would convince the Senate to execute Order 65 against Sidious, which would authorize the detainment of the Supreme Chancellor through lethal force if necessary, if it was found he was unfit to issue orders. And he would watch as the entire galaxy turned on Sidious, including the clones, and he would personally lead the charge against Sidious and destroy him himself. Then, in the vacancy of power, and the end of the destructive Jedi and the corrupt Chancellor, he would rise as the hero of the galaxy, as the one who helped defeat the Jedi and expose the Chancellor, and with this positive perception of him, he would pull all the right strings, even if they needed to be pulled in the shadows to seize power and be the head of his new empire. Then he would protect his family including his future children, and give them the peace, freedom, justice, and security that his new empire could provide for them. Darth Vader reveled in his plan and contemplated it as he spent his time with Padme on Naboo. Although for the time being, Padme would tell Vader that their relationship could not happen because of her position as senator and his as a Jedi, he knew of the inevitability of her ultimately confessing her love and that they would ultimately be married. Now, he only needed to do his best to recreate the events that led to that and have patience. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm again blown away by how many people have watched and commented and liked and subscribed. It really means the world to me. Please continue to do that. Continue to like, continue to comment, continue to subscribe, because it really encourages me to move forward and helps me to know that I should make more of these. And I just want to have a little commentary, just a little bit, that so Vader's suit in Legends was much more painful and than it is in canon. And the thing is, though, when I had Anakin be inside of a Bacta tank, um, which is where Vader's body was, that is something from canon. Because apparently in Legends, Vader never was actually in any Bacta tanks. And so, to make it less confusing for me and for you guys, I'm going with Vader's suit from canon. So it was going to be a lot more painful for him. But, I did read from canon Vader's suit that those neural needles were actually painful. So there's that. I just wanted to add that little commentary in there. I'm not saying canon is better than Legends. I honestly, personally speaking, I prefer Legends to canon. But I'm not here to start any kind of controversy. I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody was interested to know about that. I do enjoy a lot of things from canon as well. Overall, we're all Star Wars fans, right? But anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have an awesome, wonderful, fantastic, and explodocious rest of your month. I just made that word up.